As we head towards the second race weekend of the 2024 season, Mercedes will be unleashing their first upgrade of it this weekend at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, with the team set to debut a brand new piece of kit that they hope will improve the efficiency of their W15 on the Jeddah circuit, in hopes of fighting the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull for pole position and, more importantly, come Sunday, a place on the podium. And the need to introduce a brand new rear ring specification for this circuit is the fact that it's a completely different kettle of fish in terms of its characteristics from that of the first track we raced on last weekend in Bahrain. With the Jeddah circuit having many more medium and high speed corners than that of the Bahrain track, more emphasis has to be placed on the levels of downforce produced, and on top of that, the efficiency at which you create it. So this means a different specification of rear ring will be needed for the weekend. And on top of this, teams, like I just mentioned, have to pay attention to the level of drag that their car produces as well, since you have to factor into the consideration that there are 2 long straights on this track as well. And for that reason, the teams will be looking to go with a low to medium range loaded rear ring in terms of downforce, as this is the most optimum rear ring to use at this event. And that is exactly what Mercedes' first upgrade of the season will be, a new track-specific rear ring for this weekend. And to achieve this efficiency on the Jeddah circuit, Mercedes have introduced a rear ring which features a massive cutout behind the DRS actuator, and also a shallower lower element than seen on the W15 in Bahrain, with their aim, as I've spoken about, at improving the efficiency of their W15 with its levels of drag produced for this event. This should also bring it much more in line to what Red Bull can produce with their RB20 in terms of efficiency, allowing a more equal platform to challenge them from. But before we go any further, if you've enjoyed the content within this video, please consider subscribing, as I would greatly appreciate it, as I'm looking to grow this channel and I have a lot more content that I want to produce. And I may even be going to the Japanese Grand Prix later on in April, so I could have some really interesting content to bring you all. Right, back to the video. And this is something that the Mercedes team need to achieve, because if we go back to last weekend's Bahrain Grand Prix and particularly look at the top speeds with both DRS open and close in qualifying, they have a massive deficit to the likes of Red Bull, Aston Martin and Ferrari, with the team all the way at the bottom with a top speed of 316 kilometers per hour. Which, as you can see on the graph on the screen now, which is from F1 telemetry data over on Twitter, because I do not call it X, they had only a 18 kilometers an hour increase with the DRS opened, which is the smallest increase out of all the teams on the grid. And if we look at the likes of, say, Red Bull and Ferrari and even Aston Martin, because they're very close, you can see there's a huge discrepancy between the amount of increase that Mercedes get when they open their DRS in comparison to those 3 teams who are the top 3 in qualifying. And let's not forget, the team 12 months ago went pretty well at this circuit, finishing in P4 and P5, only 5 seconds behind Fernando Alonso in P3. So you would presume that with all the changes made over the winter with their W15, they would have a much better chance at finding perhaps one of their cars on the podium. And if not, they certainly should be in the mix with Ferrari, battling at the very least for that spot. And yes, I say P3 because Red Bull simply, from my point of view, will have too much for the other teams to mount a full-on assault for victory. Now, of course, you may be wondering, how have Mercedes improved in those particular kind of sets of medium and high-speed corners? Well, let's go over some of the changes made to the W15. Starting off with the W15's front ring, this has undergone an extreme redesign from last year and is without doubt the most interesting looking front ring this season thus far. For starters, the nose itself on the W15 has been repositioned to sit on the second element of the front ring. This is a shift away from last year where it was housed on the first element. Away from that change, the front wing flaps have seen a reprofiling for this year, with the aim of guiding the air around the outside of the front tyres. But this is where things become crazy, and amazingly, on the actual real launch car, it seems the fourth element of the front wing does not appear to be mounted onto the side of the nose cone in the traditional manner, and what they're trying to achieve is extremely interesting. It appears Mercedes are trying to achieve with their front wing the rebirth of the inboard vortex known as the Y250. Now, for legality purposes, the team have attached this fourth element by way of a legality wire. This would be huge for the team if they can achieve this and it's passed through the FIA scrutineering. But I think some of you may be asking, well, what is the Y250 vortex? Let me explain this to you. Basically, in the previous eras of Formula 1 with the front wing, you could also generate an inboard wash as well as the outwash. And this was known as the Y250 vortex. And when generated, it influenced the airflow characteristics downstream of the front wing, as seen in the image above. This improved the efficiency of the underbody, which in this current case would of course be the floor, which is the most important, but it also helped the cooling systems and rear ring. So, in closing, if Mercedes actually could reintroduce the Vortex Y250, this would be an impressive as well as amazing coupe for the team and should help increase the downforce by a considerable margin, I would presume. Moving further back to the front suspension on the W15, they've retained the pushrod layout from last season, but have now incorporated anti-dive fully within its design. This is something Red Bull have pioneered throughout the ground effect era of F1, and Mercedes are now finally playing catch up. But you have to do this in two sections. One is with the front suspension, while you also have to incorporate the design into the rear suspension. More on that later. But to briefly summarize what the anti-dive layout suspension is all about, it's about making sure under braking that there isn't too much bounce for the driver, and it creates a much more stable platform, and it will help to cure any understeer housed within the car. Now, of course, what does this all mean at the end of the day? Because it's not just going to be Mercedes that bring a lower downforce and lower loaded rear ring to Jeddah. Pretty much all the teams are going to be bringing one in some form or fashion. And I think that's going to offset what Mercedes produce. And I think it also leaves them having to go with an even lower drag specification of rear ring than they perhaps would have wanted to. Particularly when you look at that table with how much of an increase they get with the DRS Open. I think they've had to put that into consideration as well. So while I think they will be competitive in Jeddah, I do not think it's going to make that much of a difference to the pecking order. That's just my 2 cents on that. I could be completely wrong, and Mercedes might be the second force behind that of Red Bull. It's just something we're going to have to see play out throughout the course of the weekend. Right guys, thank you all for watching the video. If you've enjoyed it, do leave a like on it. I'll catch you all in another F1 video.